The Kansas City Chiefs finally looked like last year's Kansas City Chiefs. They go to MetLife, go to New York, defeat the Giants 22 to 9. At least it's 22 to 9 with a minute and 40 seconds left as I started recording here, and avoid starting off 0-3, which is absolutely massive for the Kansas City Chiefs because if you start off 0-3, you have a 2% shot to make the playoffs at this point. I think only 4 teams in NFL history have ever done it. So obviously 1-2 is a lot better than 0-3, especially when you're Kansas City and you have Baltimore coming to town next week. 0-3 quickly could have turned into 0-4. But as for the game tonight, ultimately, I think the difference is one of these two teams had Patrick Mahomes and the other team had Russell Wilson. I think aside from the first drive of the game, Patrick Mahomes was really, really solid for Kansas City. He was 22 of 37 for 224 yards, and he had an 85 passer rating. It wasn't, jump off the page stats, but I thought Patrick very similar to last year when Rashi was out and Hollywood Brown was hurt and Worthy was still finding his way in the offense. Just found a way to keep the chains moving, keep plays alive, calculated deep shots, rely on Kelsey, get the ball to Juju, some mix and match wide receiver pieces here and there. Tyquan Thornton kind of looks like he might be a guy for this team with his speed, and overall, just find a way to win the football game. Now, I know that there was a lot of overreaction to the Chiefs starting 0-2. This team is washed. They don't have it on my tier list. I still have them as a Super Bowl contender, and people are like, you're out of your mind. Ultimately, guys, I think Kansas City just opened the season against 2 of the 5 best teams in football in the Chargers and the Eagles, both of which are still 3-0 after this week. And they looked like they were outmanned and outmatched because they were. Their offense simply just isn't dynamic enough right now to keep up with these high-level teams. It's why I think Kansas City is probably going to struggle versus Baltimore next week. But in a matchup versus the New York Giants, you could still see the talent, discrepancy at quarterback that Patrick Mahomes has. You could still see the play caller that Andy Reid is. They do just enough to win games like they did last year. They were in a lot of one-score games last year. They won a lot of them. This year, they're 0-2 to open the season in one-score games. It's coming back to the mean. And there are some real concerns for Kansas City. The lack of a real run game. I mean, Pacheco was okay tonight, but they don't have a two-dimensional offense. Right now, it's barely one-dimensional. It's Mahomes just keeping it alive, but that'll be resolved when Rice and Worthy are back out there and guys are just in their proper roles in the passing game. Is Brashad Smith a guy? He averaged 6.5 yards per carry tonight, but only 2 attempts. But, we'll see there. Ultimately, I do think Kansas City went out and won this game on the back of Patrick Mahomes, and they needed it. 1-2, especially in the AFC after everything that's gone down today. We'll see what happens with Baltimore tomorrow if they open up the season 2-1 or 1-2. It could go either way. They're playing a good Detroit team. But Buffalo 3-0, the Chargers 3-0, feel like real Super Bowl contenders, top 10 quarterbacks, great established head coaches, solid defenses, pieces on the offense that you trust. The Colts 3-0, probably the best offense in football in terms of counting stats at this point, but how much do you trust them? And then a whole lot of what's going on here. 1-2 Broncos, 1-2 Raiders, now 1-2 Chiefs, 2-1 Bengals, but we saw what happened today. 2-1 Pittsburgh, but what's the competition been? You got Baltimore, who we'll see, which obviously I think they're legit. Jacksonville's 2-1, but do you really trust them? The Texans are 0-3, and they were obviously a playoff team and in the divisional round the last 2 years. The AFC being wonky makes this 1-2 start not as bad as it could be for Kansas City. If, say, the Broncos had beaten the Colts a week ago and they were 2-1, Joe Burrow doesn't get hurt and they're even still 2-1, and all of a sudden you're like, is Kansas City going to get in the playoffs? Now it still feels like even at 1-2, this Chiefs team is a playoff team. Again, Mahomes excellent after the first drive. I think Thornton's a guy. I thought the defense played pretty well. Spags, obviously, one of the more trusted defensive coordinators in football. You have Jones, you have McDuffie, you had the safety Cook who got hurt. You got Bolton. like just some guys that have been around Kansas City, been winning for years now at this point in time, been key pieces, and really were part of reasons that they were still in close games. The first 2 weeks, they really held Philly's offense down a week ago, and obviously with the Chargers in Brazil, it was a competitive game. And again, I can't stress this enough. Kansas City looked like Kansas City tonight. They didn't look like peak Kansas City, but they looked like Kansas City that played for most of the second half of last season once Rashee Rice went down. Patrick carries, make some good plays here and there, get the ball to Kelsey, get a couple of other weapons going, and rely on the defense. Is it a fun game? No. Is it super entertaining football? Absolutely not. But did you have any real doubts about Kansas City? Probably not. At the end of the day, they still have, in my opinion, the best quarterback in the world in Patrick Mahomes. I think you got to do more than be better than him for 3 regular season weeks to take that crown. But, you know, he hasn't been playing up to MVP standards this year. I think both of those things can be true. I'm excited to see Kansas City versus the Ravens next week. I think it's another big test. I think if they get dominated by Baltimore and they fall to 1-3, I still won't write them off, but man, it's a tough road ahead without Rashee Rice, man. And they need Worthy back soon, too. So Kansas City survives over the Giants. When it comes to the Giants, man, I think New York has a pretty bright future. They're not going to have a successful year this year. We kind of all already knew that. They had by far the worst quarterback in division. They don't have a great offensive line. They have some solid pieces on the defensive side of the ball, and they have the toughest schedule in football. We just knew that this wasn't going to be a combination for a successful season. I think the Giants are going to be better than their record dictates at the end of the year. They're 0-3 at this point. Again, out of the playoffs at this point in time. But the bright young pieces are there. Malik Neighbors, I think, is a top 10 wide receiver in all of football. Obviously, Kansas City threw a lot of double teams his way, a lot of too high safety looks. Didn't have a massive impact on this game. But after last week versus Dallas, the lightning show that him and Wan'Dale Robinson put on, Kansas City was like, no, you're beating us underneath. We're making Russ continue to make play after play. And ultimately, Russ wasn't able to make play after play. He was able to let it fly last week versus a Dallas secondary that was beaten up and not great to begin with. Kansas City, they're a different beast, okay? Their defense is better than Dallas's, I'll say that for sure. Cam Scatabo looking like he's a real piece for the future. Hopefully Tyrone Tracy gets healthy, because I do think those two are going to be a really solid 1-2 punch for the New York Giants going forward. Scatabo is just everything that he was advertised to be in college. A guy that's almost impossible to bring down, a hard-nosed runner, and a real threat in the receiving game. Tonight, he was 6 for 61. Like, he was their leading receiver in this game. Theo Johnson, I like, the tight end. I think he's got really high athletic upside. And the defensive line, Burns, Sexy Dexy, Thibodeau, Abdul Carter, Bobby Okereke, Javon Holland, like, just the defense as a whole, Paulson and Debo. I know that Mahomes was able to move the ball against these guys and have his way, but there are pieces of a playoff team all over the New York Football Giants. What it comes down to is when or if they have the quarterback. And we saw Jaxson Dart get a couple looks in this game, and you saw the crowd in New York erupt and get excited for Dart to be out there and like, we want Dart, etc. chance, I'm sure. When will he be ready? When will he get the opportunity? Next week they play the Chargers. I doubt it. 2 weeks. I wrote it down. 2 weeks. New Orleans Saints. 2 weeks, the Giants are probably 0-4. And it's like, why not let it rip with this kid? And I'm going to say this for a couple of reasons. Yes, they used their first-round pick on Jaxson Dart. However, we've seen teams that have used a first-round pick on a quarterback before, especially in the late round, be willing to move off of the guy. The Niners did it a couple of years ago with Trey Lance. Obviously, the Cardinals did it with Josh Rosen, who was a top 10 pick. You want to see what you got, and you want to give him some runway. Because if he's not good, with your schedule, you will have a top-tier pick. And this is a loaded quarterback draft class in terms of prospects. Nussmeier, Sellers, Mater, Aller, Klubnik. There's pieces coming out. 5-6 quarterbacks deep in this class. You could draft another one if Dart ain't it. But you got to find out if he's it. and you got to give them the runway to do so. So if I'm New York, I'm looking at that Saints game in a couple weeks, and I'm like, hey, let's see. Let's see what Jaxson Dart could do. I think he could bring some dynamicism to this offense. He already does with his rushing ability because they send him out there on those sets. I wish they'd let him throw the ball a little bit more in those, but if I'm the Giants, this season's going to suck. It's not going to be fun, but I do like the pieces we have going forward to be players in the NFC and in the NFC East in 2026 and beyond. Kansas City avoids falling to 0-3. I know many of us were rooting for it to happen. We didn't quite get there. The Chiefs, once again, look like the Chiefs of last year. They don't look like the best team in the AFC. They don't look like a top 3 team in the AFC. But in the AFC, I think that they look like a playoff team. And if they're going to get in, you can't count out Mahomes, Reed, Spags, Kelsey. And if they get Rice and Worthy back, I'm telling you, I think that offense, that passing attack especially, has a shot to look really, really dangerous in about a month and a half and make us go, oof, what were we saying about Kansas City when they started off 1-2, 1-3? Were we saying they were going to miss the playoffs? Because before you know it, man, I think the Chiefs are once again going to look like legit Super Bowl threats this season. For all my reactions for every other NFL game, make sure you're subscribed to the channel. That video will be going out on the channel tomorrow at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, where we are going to go through every single NFL game and react to it. We'll also be doing a reaction video like this to Monday Night Football. So if you like this style video, again, make sure you hit the subscribe button. You made it this far in the video, hit the like button, helps me out. I appreciate your guys' support. We are on the road to 500 subs. So again, every sub does matter. I appreciate all of you. Have a wonderful night, morning, afternoon, whenever you're watching this. I'll catch you next time. Peace.